Hi everyone, my name is Sienna and this is Sienna Reacts. So this is a subscriber request and it is why America sucks at everything. I guess I have a couple of clues of what this could be about, but let's go ahead, let's get into it. Rat pageant, interesting. But while we're here, maybe just, I guess, yeah, I'm not really quite sure what this is going to be about. I do think that there are some things that the US does well, better than other places, maybe not, but better than some other places, yes. So we'll see about that. I can guess things like medical care, infrastructure, and walkability, and simply, you know, having things be affordable, i.e. like school and housing and that type of thing. So yeah, let's get into it. We'll see.
America is the greatest country on earth, the strongest, the richest, the most powerful country on earth.
The country that spends the most on the military. Let's be clear. That's where that comes from.
As an American, I'm sure you've heard that roughly 135 times a year. 235 if you go to public school. 335 if you go to a Christian academy. We're told that Americans have the best lives of any people in the world. That we have low taxes, small government, and the highest living standards.
My taxes are like 30%. Who is lying? Who is lying?
On earth. And most inaccurately, that we're the freest. Well, it is partly true. America is the richest country, not just in the world, but in the history of the world. It's really hard.
More than, what was it, the Mali people? I don't think so. Maybe country, but not civilization. But anyway.
Hard to comprehend just how rich we are. We have 18 million people who are millionaires. American households own about $100 trillion in wealth, an almost unthinkable amount of money. Okay, so America is the richest country ever. But there's a curious paradox. Most Americans actually have a much worse standard of living than people who live in poorer countries like Germany or Finland or Britain. But how can that be? That's
capitalism. There's a great divide in the social economic status between like the bottom like 90% and the top 10 to 1%. Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates have more money than the next 10 generations than their generations could ever spend. However, the majority of Americans, like 60 to 70%, couldn't afford like what is like a $400 emergency, or like don't have more than like $1,000 in savings or something like that. So yes.
Shouldn't make any sense. Well, here's the shitty deal. Americans get significantly worse services because our tax dollars don't fund them. So of course our services are worse, and thus we enjoy less happy lives than people who live in the aforementioned countries. Not that difficult a concept to conceive, really. You get what you pay for, said the cartoon dog to the other cartoon dog.
But our taxes are near similar to other countries that have like quote unquote universal health care and other more encompassing socioeconomic system, or like social safety nets.
And while you might think the reason American tax dollars don't fund as many services is because we pay lower taxes than other countries, that's not even true. When you add federal, state, local, and sales taxes and include other costs and services that our taxes don't cover but other countries' taxes do, like our uniquely high health insurance premiums, you'll find that Americans actually give away more of their wages than most of the developed world. For example, in Canada, for a married worker with 2 kids, all of the previously mentioned costs combined, from taxes to health insurance premiums, make up only 11% of the average wage. In the UK, it's just about 26%. Meanwhile, once you tack on the cost of our outlandish health insurance premiums, you're spending a whopping 43% of your paycheck. That's more than France, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. In real reality, Americans keep much less of what we own than in other countries. In other countries, their government takes a bit more tax, but then gives that money back to their citizens in the form of healthcare or job support, or a general safety net for all vulnerable citizens, no matter how dusky they are. So what do Americans get for the money we pay in?
A military that gets trillions of dollars every year, and crumbling infrastructure, and super high student loans, and not free college and university. Yeah, we know. We know.
Well, sure, we get a crumbling infrastructure, shameful homelessness, and millions of hungry, neglected children, but...
And 15 million empty homes that could house all of the homeless people here in America, but they're sitting empty because they're investments. Capitalism. Yay.
We also get some of the worst services in the developed world. Again, our healthcare. American healthcare is simultaneously the most expensive, the least efficient, and the least effective healthcare system in the developed world. Hey, the devil's trifecta. And in exchange for this extremely expensive, inefficient healthcare system, what do we get? Well, we get some of the worst health outcomes in the developed world. We have fewer hospital beds per capita than people in Turkey or Brunei. Americans have a lower life expectancy than people in Lebanon or Cuba. And in the Mississippi Delta and much of Appalachia, life expectancy is lower than in Bangladesh. In fact, in 2017, the United Nations sent a commissioner to West Virginia to document what he saw, and he described, quote, third world conditions of absolute poverty, unquote. We even have a higher infant mortality rate than people in Russia and Serbia. In every single metric, America does worse across the board. So why is healthcare so expensive? Because it's so complicated. You have to look for in-network physicians, schedule an established...
And lobbying from different, interest groups to Congress.
Care appointment, beg for coverage from your insurance company that couldn't care less about you, and that's if you're lucky enough to have good insurance. Compare that to Britain and all of those other evil, socialist-like countries where it's simple. Public hospitals provide free treatment to people who need it. That's it. I'll repeat that. Public hospitals provide free treatment to people who need it. And here's the best part. Even though Britain offers healthcare for free, their system is actually a lot cheaper to run than ours. Per capita healthcare spending in the US is almost 3 times what it is in Britain, and almost 5 times what Canadians spend. In fact, Americans spend the most per person of any country in the world for healthcare. But the free market is more efficient, you screech. But in America, private systems often aren't efficient at all. Private drug companies have an incentive to charge whatever they can get away with for pharmaceuticals. In Canada, a carton of insulin costs about $20. In the US, it costs $300. And with private insurance companies footing the bill, hospitals have an incentive to get as much money out of patients as possible too. In 2015, the average cost of an MRI scan in the US was $1,119. But it was only $215 in Australia. Spain?
Yeah, so not an MRI, but I had to get a X-ray for reasons, and I had to pay $500 out of pocket because there was a mix-up in my insurance. So yes,
about $181. And our healthcare system is so inefficient that we spend over a third of our cost on administration. The United States spends significantly more on administration than we spend on preventative or long-term health care. That's just not smart. Okay, we get it. We all know that American healthcare is so much more expensive, you say, but that's the cost of having the freest freedom in God's favorite country. Well, guess what? Medical procedures that are totally free in Britain, like giving birth, cost tens of thousands of dollars in the United States. I mean, you want to talk about the cost of freedom. Sadly, because of these high costs, Americans often avoid going to the doctor, something almost half the population say they do. With shoddy or non-existent health insurance, Americans will wait until their conditions force them into the emergency room where treatment is far more expensive. Again, not a smart system. Quite often, they end up putting off medical visits and dying. Susan Finley, a 53-year-old Walmart employee in Colorado, got pneumonia and took one day off of work beyond what Walmart's policy allows. So of course, Walmart's gonna Walmart, which they did by firing her. Without her job, she lost her nominal health care coverage, she struggled to find new work, and after avoiding a visit to the doctor for flu-like symptoms, she was found dead in her apartment. When Americans do manage to get treated, they frequently can't afford it. Simple, life-saving treatments can cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if they don't have really good insurance, they're forced to take on medical debt. Tens of millions of Americans owe medical debt, often into the tens of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, in a country like Britain or Norway, medical debt is almost unheard of. But hey, that's why GoFundMe is such a critical component of American healthcare. 1 in 3 GoFundMe campaigns is now for medical bills. I'll repeat that. 1 in 3 GoFundMe campaigns is now for medical bills. America is such a strong, powerful, rich, and great country that its citizens have to beg strangers on the internet for money so they can get life-saving treatments that are free in the rest of the developed world. But hey, that's just healthcare. Americans get terrible deals wherever you look. Let's take work for
Pause. Okay, so before we move on, or he's going into work, so I'm sure it's going to tie in, but something that I think is really interesting that I have actually heard from not a lot, but multiple people that I've talked to from other countries is like when I kind of explain what's going on, a lot of them are just like, oh, like why doesn't America just like riot? Like if this was like my country, like everything would be up in flames until we get, something better. But you kind of saw like in that little like story how it plays out, right? So if you take off time to go like riot or like change things, sorry, my cat is like let me in, but I'm gonna finish this. If you take off time to go like riot or like do whatever, you can lose your job. And then when you lose your job in the US, our medical insurance is tied to our employment. So that means you can lose your health coverage. So if you were to get sick during that time of, trying to look for another job and get on another health plan, you would be out in a worse situation than if you would have, just like stayed at your job and not said anything, which is how the system keeps being perpetuated, is because people aren't able to do what is necessary, right? And then because I mentioned earlier how like the majority of Americans wouldn't be able to afford like a $400 emergency, it's studied, I'm not just saying things, but because of that, even more so, you're poor, like you don't have the money to be able to do these things, so staying out of work, not being able to afford anything, continues to perpetuate the exact same situation, because you have to go to work, because if you don't have work, you don't have healthcare, and because if you don't have work, you don't get paid, which means that you can't put food on the table because you are living paycheck to paycheck, which like 70-something% of the US is. Yes.
For example, Americans work longer hours than people in any other rich country in the world, and that's not because they enjoy sleep deprivation and not seeing their families for days at a time. It's because they don't want to starve or freeze or die. See, America has the least generous job support programs, the least generous family benefits, and the least generous unemployment benefits of any wealthy country. It's one of the only countries on earth that doesn't guarantee paid time off for vacations. It doesn't even help provide paid time off for parents who just had a child. And it's not coincidental that we're also one of the most hostile countries to workers' rights. America has one of the lowest unionization rates in the entire world. Maybe this deprivation, our refusal to give people the means to lead a good, dignified life commensurate with how rich our country is, can explain a bit of what we've seen in the United States over the last few decades. Fraying communities, rising rates of depression and suicide, huge numbers of death from drug overdoses. These so-called deaths of despair, suicide, drug overdoses, alcoholic liver disease, they're one big reason why American life expectancy has actually started to decline over the last few years.
And this is like especially prevalent in like the Midwest and in the southern US. This like so-called like Rust Belt and or like Sun Belt area, which now people are moving to because, or people from like higher costs of living, such as like California, New York, like the coastal areas of the US are now moving into these areas because it's quote unquote more affordable. Like the housing is cheaper generally, you know, like you're not going to Starbucks and like spending like $15 like you would if you were in New York or something like that, right? Like generally the cost of living is lower, but what that is doing, it's actually making the system worse and making the lives worse for the native people of that areas, because now everything is becoming more expensive. And in my area, houses that used to cost $100,000 now cost, you know, they're asking for like $400,000 in like the hood, where 10 years ago no one would even think of like moving into. Like you moved into those areas if, you know, you did not have a choice. And now again, the whole like deaths of despair is increasing in our areas because it's becoming less affordable. So it's cyclical. They are all included. Everything makes everything worse. Yeah.
And with such poor conditions, it's not a surprise that poverty is so rampant in the United States. America devotes a smaller percentage of spending on social welfare than any other industrialized economy because, say it with me, socialism is evil. It's evil. Go to Denmark and try telling those happy, healthy families enjoying their paid vacation that their system of government is evil. Guess what? I guarantee they'll know you're an American. But I digress. America also has the highest rate of child poverty of any developed country, and the highest percentage of workers earning significantly less than the national median income. That seems pretty evil to me, especially since such a tiny fraction take as much of your money for themselves and their families as you will let them. All the while, both parties smile and shake hands. Across every single metric, no people accept a worse deal than Americans today. High taxes, high cost of living for next to nothing in return from the government. The most expensive healthcare system for the worst health outcomes. More money taken from workers for the highest rate of child poverty. We are the richest country in the history of the world, but we have fewer miles of high-speed rail than Uzbekistan. We are the greatest
capitalism and also big car lobbies. Anyway,
country in the world, yet we have the most people in prison of any country and the highest incarceration rate as well, and a higher rate of police killings than in Angola and Sudan. America is bad at everything because instead of choosing to make life better for people through a public healthcare system or more generous childcare policies or better public transit or programs that allow people to spend more time with their families, American law is designed and crafted to protect a class of parasitical middleman industries. Instead of using a proportionally tiny piece of the massive amount of the wealth in this country to make people's lives healthier and happier, most of our elected leaders are, and have been for generations, engaged in a massive project of looting, gently and lovingly guiding as much money as possible from working people into the pockets of the well-connected and the ultra-rich. Think about that as we start hearing about the inevitable rise in homelessness, poverty, starvation, and sickness that will occur during these coming months and years in the greatest, strongest, richest, most powerful country on the face of the earth.
I mean, yeah.
I'm David Cross for the Gravel Institute.
Okay, so this was interesting. I guess I am American, so none of this surprised me. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm trying to leave, basically, or leave again. Yeah. Hopefully something like COVID doesn't happen again. Oh my God. Tried to. But yeah, this was pretty much, I guess, like what I was expecting. Also, if you do have, I guess, like any questions for me, I'm not quite sure if I would or depending on how many people watch this video and comment, I'm not sure if I would be able to get to everyone, but I do try and at least read everything and to respond to as many people as I can. So yeah, please go ahead. Let's hear down the comments. However, I do want to say something I do want to mention is that if I see people kind of like dunking on Americans and being like, ha ha ha, that's why, you know, like there's like child shootings or like shootings in school or stuff like that, right? Or like, this is why we have healthcare and blah, blah, blah. If I see any of that, you're getting blocked, because like death and poverty and like cyclical generations of suffering is not something to ha 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 about and to make you feel like superior to Americans. So if I see any of that, you're getting blocked, your comment is getting deleted. So I'm going to put that out before hopefully people actually like listen to what I'm saying instead of being horrible people. That's one of the reasons I had to turn off my comments in another video. But anyway, just wanted to put that out before. We're going to go ahead. Let's end it here. This video will be in the description box if you want to go and watch the original video on your own. But yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Okay, so bye-bye.